Let me go to my next guest, the member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, but also Minister of Electricity, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa. Thank you for coming through to electrify us in this conversation. And I was just looking at the economic aspects of what you are discussing in the NGC, economic transformation. And there's been a lot of grappling with and reckoning with what has happened in the last few years, much of it very frank and honest. Frankly and honestly, what is your grappling and reckoning with how the economy has been managed by the ANC, particularly in the last 15 years?
Oh, good evening, Tulas, and thank you very much, Tulas Caesar. Thanks for the invitation. I don't think that we have met our own expectations. So I think the levels of growth are nowhere close to what the NDP advocates for. I mean, 2012, when we articulated the vision we see of a South Africa we want by 2030, one of the injunctions of the NDP is that for us to be able to achieve those aspirational targets, the economy needs to grow year on year on average 5.5%. The levels of investments in the South African economy, what we call gross fixed formation, really a proxy for investment should be about 30% of GDP. And of that 30% of GDP, 2/3 must come from the private sector. As I speak to you now, the levels of investments in the South African economy is about 14.9%. And then we talk about the levels of unemployment. The NDP says by 2030, we should be sub 10% unemployment levels. I think it puts it at about 6%. We are nowhere close to that. And then it makes a point around the Human Development Index, but we also are beginning to see that the levels of poverty have been rising. The Gini coefficient, which is a statistical measure of inequality, has gone up. Yeah. So I'm just saying, if you look at those indices, you see that they were far removed from where we want to be. But that does not subtract from the fact that we have made strides in other parts of the South African economy and the lived experiences of our people.
We will get to the strides you've made, particularly in the political report, the president making the point that as the NGC sits, we are starting to see green shoots of a possible turnaround. But I want to continue on this theme of fully grappling with what has happened for just a few more minutes. Would you agree that in not managing the economy properly and being able to lead to all those lofty goals that you had set for yourselves all those many years ago, this National Democratic Society that you're talking about, National Democratic Revolution, has been set back by quite a significant amount of time, a decade, 2 decades, if not more?
Oh yes, you're absolutely correct. You know, what characterizes the conversations in the NGC is that we must be brutally frank with the reality that is confronting us. And the evidence is there, the numbers are there to show that we are far removed from where we want to be. And I'm not saying we have not made progress, we have made progress, but that's not sufficient progress. Of course, there are other externalities. I mean, the 2008 global financial meltdown has meant that it put the brakes on the South African economy. I mean, the period preceding that, 2003 to 2004, is what I refer to as the golden years of the South African economy. We're growing much closer to 5%. I mean, even at that point, you could see the electricity that has been generated reach its peak. The amount of throughput at our ports reached its peak. So there is a relationship between economic growth, throughputs at the port, and also the amount of electricity that is being generated and consumed. And of course, we have seen that levels of growth were stunted over a period of time. So this 10 years, really, we have not been able to make the necessary advancement towards that National Democratic Society. And that's why we are advocating for additional intervention and acceleration of this intervention. And the president is absolutely correct. These are green shoots, but we want them to be, if you like, a permanent feature going forward, and it must be sustained.
Much of the language in government, at least, of the ANC and at least government, and as led by the ANC until recently, or at least the elements of the state led by the ANC, talks about structural reforms of the economy. Are those structural reforms where we should be looking as South Africans for where growth will come from, where this turnaround on unemployment will come from? Because even within your own alliance, there are those who are saying that these structural reforms are really about you saying, let us farm off certain portions of what we need to do to the private sector in the form of triple Ps and other collaborations through the so-called pipeline industries. But that is nothing other than privatization. So to a South African who's listening to those voices, what will these structural reforms mean for economic growth, for our children to be able to find employment as and when they come of age to be able to find employment?
So I want to depart from the language construction, the color, and to the substance. And I want to use a real and life example on the logistics side and the energy side. So what does this structural reform really mean in the electricity sector? What it says is that there's been a monopoly that is called Eskom, and if this monopoly fails, it drags the economy with it. And that's why we've characterized the deficit in relation to electricity generation as a structural constraint to the South African economy. If the lights are off, the factories will not produce, farmers will not be able to harvest, small businesses in townships are unable to operate because the cost of running generators is prohibitive. So what did we say? We say introduce additional players on the generation side. What have we seen since 2011 when we introduced these bid windows is that cumulatively over this period, there's an additional 8,000 megawatts that has been added to the grid. We just released the IRP. We think that there's additional generation capacity that's going to come. And then we have seen that working with the private sector, we've been able to bring additional capacity to help us in relation to some of the challenges from the capacity point of view, technical expertise point of view. That has helped us a great deal in ensuring that these power stations that were complicit in bringing load shedding, in fact now they are some of the best performers. So really it's not about relinquishing state ownership. It's just an admission that competition at all times is healthy. Eskom continues to be the backbone of energy generation in the country. The reason why you are seeing an acceleration of private sector participation is that Eskom is a battery of the South African economy. Eskom is a backstop. If our bilateral transaction that as a generator or an off-taker privately doesn't take off, you have the assurance that you can tap into Eskom. And then on the logistics side, Minister Chris in his official capacity introducing private sector and off-balance sheet transaction that helps us to roll out with great speed the refurbishment of rail infrastructure, introduction of port players. What are we seeing is that the volumes are beginning to pick up. The throughput of freight logistics is going up, and that has got an impact on the South African economy. So it's not privatization. Of course, I mean, there's a big conversation that is happening now that we are relinquishing that balance that characterize the ANC, that now we're talking of reforms instead of talking transformation. Can have a theoretical and ideological conversation about that. But what is the substance? What is it that we are overform? And that's the conversation we're having.
I'm completely out of time, but I've got to thank you for coming through. That's the Electricity Minister, but also member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, talking there towards the end, the Tembegile and Bongiwe, about substance over form. Call it reforms, call it whatever, as long as it achieves unclogging the arteries of the South African economy. The contention of the ANC is that it will likely lead to economic growth and the changes that we need in the economy. That's part of the economic transformation conversations, one of multiple conversations that are happening as we speak.
Tulasiza Simelane, SABC News anchor at the ANC's National General Council. It's underway at the Birchwood Hotel here in Gauteng. By the way, a full SABC team bringing you up-to-the-minute coverage of that gathering until it concludes on Thursday.